In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, Leif Thulin is going to share his thoughts on the top big man prospects in the 2025 NBA draft. Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe. My voice is still struggling. It's been like this for I guess it's the last 3 episodes. So just bear with me. No load management here. I'm just going to fight through it. I want to let you know that this episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Also, check out the Locked On newsletter. Your favorite Locked On NBA podcast has a newsletter. Check it out at lockedondaily.com. The newsletter will be delivered to your inbox every single morning. So whatever team you support, whether it is Locked On Lakers, Knicks, Mavs, Bulls, check it out, lockedondaily.com. Also, like, share, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel because we are your daily source for NBA draft content. So click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode. Like I mentioned in the open, this episode, we are going to talk about the man in the middle, Leafs top big man prospects in the 2025 NBA draft. All right, Leif. So far, the college basketball season is a little more than a month old. And just looking at the big men that are on this rundown here, from Derik Queen to Khaman Maluach, Asa Newell, Maxime Raynaud, and Johni Broome, is your rankings of these prospects different than it was a month ago?
Yeah, I think a lot of these I would have had in a similar order. I think the biggest difference is how impressed I've been with Derik Queen, whereas Khaman Maluach, I came into the season pretty high on him. I had him top 7, I think, in my kind of vague general rankings entering the season. I'm a little lower, not super far low on Maluach, but Derik Queen's done enough to perpetuate himself into the top 10 for me. And Derik Queen has basically done everything. If you look at Tankathon, and you go to that page that says stat strengths versus stat weaknesses, his stat strengths are absolutely every stat that they list, which is about 25 of them, except for blocks and three-point percentage, which I know are trendy, especially for big men. And blocks is a very big time indicator. Like, that translates. If you block shots in college, you block shots in the NBA typically. So, yes, he's not a great athlete. And the three-point shot, I actually have a bit of faith in because he shoots 78, 79% from the free throw line. So, Derik Queen is the biggest riser, I would say, of anyone on my board. And I'm going to publish that in an episode soon. You look at what he does well in terms of not statistics, just watching the game. He's got good footwork. He's got good vision. He uses his body well. He's got a strong body for someone who's just out of high school. He's playing against people that are older than him. They've played solid competition. And no matter who he plays, he's able to find his way near the hoop, use his body well, create angles for his shots, create shots for his teammates. I just think all of those things that are intangibles and skill set related are things that translate, and you can improve. I'm not saying he'll become an amazing athlete. I'm not saying he'll become an excellent rim protector, but I think he can become a little more quick twitch in time, a little bit more able to elevate quickly. And it's not going to be night and day. It's not going to make him an upper echelon athlete in the NBA. Far the contrary, but those type of things he can improve a little bit, and very few players can ever get to the skill level that Derik Queen has, both on the low block and out of the mid post.
Yeah, we're talking about Derik Queen, the 6'10 freshman from Maryland. Queen is averaging 17.5 points, 8.7 rebounds, 2.4 assists while shooting 61% from the floor. College career got off to a great start when he had a 2020 game. Any concerns about his NBA fit? I think most people will tell you that he was super talented coming into the season. The biggest concern was, is he going to measure out at 6'10", and how does he fit in today's NBA where a lot of times when you look at like a center in today's NBA, they want you to be a low usage big that is a vertical lob threat that can anchor the defense, or a dominant low post player that can also space the floor. Any concerns just on the defensive end? Because that's usually the knock that people have about Queen, and how will he fare in the NBA?
I don't think he's ever going to be a good NBA defender. I just don't think that's going to happen. But I do think there's so much emphasis today on skill level offensively. Like if you can't shoot in the NBA, if you're playing 1 through 4, forget about it. It's really, really hard to play. And there's been notable players that have been drafted highly and have really found their way out of rotations because of their lack of shooting. And then in this past draft, when we look at the success stories, it's players like Jared McCain, it's players like Dalton Connect, who you don't overthink their deficiencies. McCain's small and he plays the 2. Dalton Connect's old. Well, they can shoot the ball, and so therefore they're valued. And I know we're talking about a different position where defense is a little more pivotal in terms of performance at the position, meaning the center. But Derik Queen has all the skills offensively that I think will translate. I think he's the type of guy that no matter what level he's playing at, he'll be able to control the game and score. He just has this way of creating space, his ability to put the ball in the hoop from different angles and different positions on the floor. And also, I've been very impressed with his passing.
Yeah, when I first saw him play, that was the first thing that stood out to me. It was a game against Sunrise Christian, and he just picked them apart with his passing. This was probably like 2 or 3 years ago. Maybe it was 2, I'm not for sure. But I've always thought that he was a really good passer. And I personally think that whatever deficiencies there are on the defensive end, I think his passing can kind of like close that gap, because I feel like in today's NBA, if you're going to be a gifted low post player, then you have to be a really good passer that can make teams pay for double teaming you. And when I look at like a guy like Alperen Sengun, who is extremely skilled, not necessarily the anchor of a defense, but on the offensive end, he can kill you in the post. He is a good passer. He's a guy that I think can be or will be the hub of an offense for the majority of his career. Do you see any similarities between Queen and Shingun?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I have 2 notes here that I wanted to share. And one of them, and I have it circled here on my sticky note, it says hub offensively. And I hadn't likened him to Shangoon, but I think there are so many teams that in this copycat league are emulating what the Celtics do and spraying a ton of threes. Well, that's not sustainable for a lot of teams because they don't have the people to knock down those shots, and they don't have the players to create the individual advantages that enable those kick out shots to be so open where it makes people help. What people can do is find a way to orchestrate their offense differently. A couple of years ago, the Sacramento Kings had Domantas Sabonis run a bunch of handoffs and be an orchestrator as an offensive hub. Alperen Sengun does it a little bit differently. And of course, the grand master of this is Nikola Jokic, who is averaging a triple-double in the NBA. So being able to operate from the interior and being able to operate inside out with a center is becoming more and more valuable in the NBA. And I think though he and Sengun, I think, move differently, like their bodies are a little different to me. Neither are gifted vertical athletes, but they use their bodies differently. I can see the way that they could be likened to one another. My other note I have listed is against high major teams that are good teams too, that have been ranked. He has scored 24-7 against Marquette, 22-11 against Villanova on the road. Against Ohio State, 17-11. He probably would have scored more had they played him more minutes because they were absolutely dismantling the Buckeyes. And then they played Purdue at Purdue in 26-12. So in 4 games against the best of the best, he's been dominant. And I know you can say the NBA athletes are better. They are. But it doesn't really matter. This is a 19-year-old who's dominating no matter who he's played against at the collegiate level. I just think he finds a way to impact the game so positively offensively that the defensive inefficiency or just deficiencies, to put it bluntly, will be able to be overlooked in some degree. Now you have to, if he ends up being a star on your team or a huge player, a role player, you need to have players that can make up for those deficiencies. But that's the give and take in the NBA in terms of roster construction.
Yeah, I wrote an article. It came out Monday on NBABigBoard.com where I interviewed a bunch of scouts and agents, and the majority of them said that Derik Queen was their biggest surprise coming into the first or after the first month of the season. They all knew he was talented, but just from the different agents or scouts that I spoke with, some were impressed by the passing. And one of the things that stood out to me when I interviewed them was I can't remember if it was a scout or agent, but he mentioned that Queen is in shape this year. He's like, I wonder how good he's going to be when he's in great shape, because he felt like he was fat in high school. And there's a picture of him where you can see that there is a difference. And he thinks he's even going to be better once he gets in great shape, because he just thinks he's in shape right now. All right, up next, we're going to talk about Khaman Maluach, a player that I had as my top big man coming into the season. I don't know if he's the top big now. I want to get Leif's opinion on, should we factor in what we've seen, or should we just base where he's drafted totally on the upside? And is this a similar situation to Dereck Lively, who was at Duke a couple years ago? All right, before we get into the second segment, let's talk about FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action on FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it is all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it is on the same page where you placed your bets. Just visit fanduel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Next, I want to talk about Mint Mobile. And with Mint Mobile, you can say goodbye to overpriced wireless plans and jaw-dropping monthly bills and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans that start at just $15. Yes, you heard that correct. $15. Each plan comes with high-speed data and unlimited talking text, and it is on the nation's largest 5G network. And with Mint Mobile, you can use your own phone. You can keep your contacts and your phone number. And this is the best way to ditch the high prices, as with Mint Mobile, you can get a deal where you get 3 months of premium wireless for just $15 a month. To start this new offer and your 3-month premium wireless plan for $15, go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. You can cut your wireless bill down to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. And a $45 upfront payment is required, which is the equivalent to $15 a month for new customers on a 3-month plan only. Speed slower, above 40 gigabytes on the unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Second segment, let's talk about Khaman Maluach. I had him at number 6 on my Big Board 1.0 coming into the season. 7'2", 250-pound freshman from Duke, from the South Sudan. A player that, if you are very hesitant about him, I totally understand why you would be. And if you are high on his upside, I totally get that. He has the positional size. Like I mentioned in the first segment about what I think a lot of teams are looking for in a center, is someone that can anchor a defense. And he fits the bill as your low usage big that can anchor the defense, that can stretch the floor vertically. And he's shown some flashes of being able to space the floor with the 3 ball. Right now, he's averaging 7 points per game, shooting 77% from the floor. He had a really good game tonight against Incarnate Word, where he had a career high. I think he had like 17 points. Incarnate Word is not, the best competition, but he's had games where it looks like Coach Shire at Duke doesn't trust him, with Malik Brown playing the majority of the minutes. And the reason why I feel like he got off tonight is because Malik Brown didn't play. So I want to hear your thoughts on Maluach, and where are you at today compared to where you were a month ago.
Yeah, I had him 7 coming into the season, so you and I were in similar thought processes there. But I'll say this: you watch him against Army, and he had 11 points, 14 boards, and everyone's thinking, "Wow, this guy's awesome." Granted, the competition they're not huge, but he's going to get you a ton of rebounds, and he's going to anchor the defense and what has been the number one defense according to Ken Palm in defensive efficiency. So that's wonderful. Then against Kentucky, he plays, and before he cramped, Duke was going to win that game. They're up 10. They probably should have won the game anyway, but Kentucky couldn't score on the interior. And though they shot 10 of 25 from 3, Jackson Robinson no-showed, and they had to retreat and not get good shots. And I was thinking to myself, okay, he might be a top 5 pick. Like in my head, watching that game, I sold myself all the way. Since then, he's not played very much, and he hasn't had that much of an impact, even though they've played 2 behemoth 7-footers in Hunter Dickinson and Johni Broome. And you'd think, okay, well, let's put the 7-2 guy who's known for defense in. And that's where I think he's been hurt by comparison. Malik Brown's one of the best defenders in the country, maybe the best defender in the country. And so he's played instead of Maluach, and all of his athleticism and quickness and long arms, aggression on the ball that you get from playing years of collegiate basketball have paid off. And he's looked the part as the better player that helps Duke win in the short term. And I love what Shire's doing, because I often criticize Calipari for playing players that help their NBA draft stock, but you're paid to win the college team games when you're the head coach, not to get the players to the NBA. And maybe that's controversial, but that's what I firmly believe. Maluach has been the guy who's been burned for it, though, because it's not that he's not necessarily good. It's just that Malik Brown's been better. And you expect that typically of a guy who's 4 years older. And so Khaman Maluach has been mostly quiet in games since that juncture, and Malik Brown has shined. Like you mentioned today, the shackles were off of Maluach, and he was able to shine and showcase his full skill set. I think he's similar to like a raw Mark Williams, the way he played the freshman year. And then he had a great finish to that freshman year. And then sophomore year, he anchored one of the best defenses in the country on a Final Four team. So you can compare him to Williams or Lively. I think he's more raw than Lively was. Lively just had injuries at Duke, and so the lack of productivity is what is the comparison. But he was a far more polished player. He was someone who had more experience playing the AAU circuit, obviously, than Khaman did. And he resembles more of a Mark Williams to me early in his freshman year.
Yeah, with Lively, I hated the pairing of him and Filipowski together. If there's one thing I've been critical about of Duke, it is they bring in these highly touted classes, but I don't feel like the pieces match. Like I just feel like, all right, you got two bigs and Lively and Filipowski. I guess in theory, you may feel like they could complement each other if Filipowski's knocking down the 3 ball, but I think ultimately they're both 5s. I look at this team this year. I think Maluach is I mean, you can't argue with his efficiency, 77% from the floor, but I also think that he could average more points per game if they had better point guard play. And so when I try to see how his game scales up to the NBA, I think he's going to be fine. Yes, he's still raw, but in the NBA, he is going to have better point guard play and better spacing. Right now, when he's on the floor with Cooper Flag, and as far as good as Flag has been, he can't shoot. Like he really struggles shooting. So he doesn't have the spacing. I think once he gets to the NBA, he's not going to, or it's unlikely he plays with a 4 that shoots 20-something% from 3, and he's going to have better point guard play. So I think he's going to be a better pro because his role is pretty simple in the NBA. Anchor the defense and be a play finisher, and he should have better spacing and a better point guard. All right, I want to switch up to Asa Newell. Newell was a guy coming into the season. I had questions on if he was a 4 or a 5. I know that he showed flashes of being able to shoot the ball at Montverde, but it hasn't translated at all this season as he's shooting like 16% from 3. 6'11", 220, athletic, great motor. Like, you know what you're going to get from him. But the 2 concerns that I had coming into the season for him was how well does he rebound, and does he protect the paint? And the answer was going to kind of help me determine was he a 4 or a 5, and I still feel like it's incomplete with him. What are your thoughts?
I'm right there with you because I'm someone who very much values positional size and very much values the long-term potential. I firmly believe in potential being the way to draft in these type of drafts that have franchise-altering talents. You'll hear me say that a lot throughout this process. I'm not saying he's one of those guys, but he's one of those guys that in the mid to like lottery to mid-round where you think, well, that could be a really good return on investment as opposed to someone who's like, oh, you know what? I think that won't be a bust. And that's two different ways of framing it. Well, the thing about Asa Newell to me is I'd rather have him be a 4 for me if he pans out, but I think it's safer to project him as a 5, an undersized 5 that's an energy guy, someone who changes ends, runs the floor, gets rebounds, may not be the best interior defender, but is able to be athletic enough and influence shots. I don't buy the jump shot, and I wanted to, but I mean, he's shooting 13% last I checked, and
15.8. Give
he,
him his 2.8 points.
he moved it up. He moved it up. So good for him in that regard. And it is a small sample size thus far, but you watch the way he plays, and he's so athletic, so coordinated for the size. I really like those attributes. But like I mentioned in the outset, if you're playing 1 through 4 and you can't shoot, it's really tough sledding in the NBA right now because of the priority of shooting has just gone up and up as the Celtics have revolutionized even further what Steph Curry started. They started shooting more threes, and now the Celtics have made it so they shoot even more threes. And sometimes there's a saying, live and die by a 3. But like I said about the Celtics, they have the creators. He fits in this rare, unique ability to slide the feet and guard multiple positions like the Celtics can do. And that's what every team's going to look to match because it's a copycat league. But I just don't think he shoots it well enough. And that's why I put him on this big man in the middle podcast, because I think he's going to be someone who teams want to play the 4, but likely slots in better as a 5 in the pros.
Yeah, and I mean he's 3 of 19 from 3 in 9 games, so he's taken two a game, and then he's only shooting 62% from the foul line. The rebounding numbers was something that I wanted to pay attention to and monitor. 6.6 rebounds per game in about 27 minutes. That's, I guess, okay, not bad. But on the defensive end, he is averaging 1.2 blocks and 1.3 steals. And I agree with you 100%. He is a guy that you want to be able to play at the 4, but he looks like a 5. And I don't think that he's undersized, at least based off of what they have him listed at. They have him listed at 6'11", 220. And so I don't think that's...
He's a slender 220.
Yeah, I mean, that 220 could be generous. It's one of those things where I'm like, okay, we'll see what he weighs in at the combine, even though he could pack on some muscle between April and May at the combine. But he's a guy that I just think is a tweener, and I think he could be a player that there's a team that really likes him and they could take him in the middle of the first round. Or he's a guy that I think could slide because people may be concerned of is he, or because he's a tweener. So he's someone
he's like Leonard Miller, like a guy that I really liked. I think Leonard Miller had more on-ball skills, but that's a guy who slid because he's not a very good shooter, but he's a significantly better shooter at the similar juncture to Asa Newell, and they have similar body types. I think they're a little different. Asa is more able to play the 5, so it allows him a different position. But I just thought of that as you spoke about tweeners, and the history would suggest the tweeners slide.
Yeah, but Leonard Miller, at least you knew that whether you thought he was undersized 5 or not, you knew he was a dominant rebounder. I mean, I was at a game where he had 20 rebounds. And also with Miller, I feel like the year prior, I don't know if you were at the combine that year, the year prior, everyone thought he was like a Lamar Odom type point forward, and he had to totally readjust his game. I'm still a big Leonard Miller apologist, and it's just unfortunate that it doesn't look like he's going to get the opportunity to get some minutes in Minnesota. All right, up next, we're going to talk about a couple of veteran bigs. Before we get into the last segment, I want to talk about my favorite app when it comes to purchasing tickets, and that is Game Time. Game Time makes purchasing tickets to sporting events, movies, comedy, theaters, and plays, and much more. It makes it very simple. They have all-in pricing. Toggle the feature on the app, and it will show you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkouts. Also, the Game Time app gives you a panoramic view from your seat so you can see where you're going to be sitting or your view in the app before you buy. Game Time also has the lowest price guarantee. If you find something cheaper, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the redeem code Locked On NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. All right, last segment. Maxime Raynaud, 7-footer from France, who is absolutely having a phenomenal year. What are your thoughts on him?
So this is a guy I watch probably more than anyone else because I am a Stanford fan. And ever since he arrived at Stanford, you saw undeniable flashes of talent and coordination, fluidity from someone of that size. The big knock on him initially was he's just not strong enough. Like once he gets to league play, he's going to get bumped around. And that happened at times. But this year, the difference has been he's been the focal point of every offensive possession. Whereas in years past, he's played alongside guys who can also score the ball. Last year, he played next to Kanan Carlisle. Carlisle had the ball and would try to score often. This year, it's Raynaud, and it's Raynaud is the answer. He's the offensive engine. He creates as a passer. I'm not saying he's got the same hub capacity as Derik Queen, but the reason I bring this up is all of the length and athleticism fluidity has come to fruition to him scoring 22 points and doing it as someone who can create it out of isolation. He's got plenty of coordination to catch lobs. He can even pop and shoot the three. He's a good free throw shooter for the position. He's 7'1" with the long arms, and he can block shots, take up space, moves nimbly, and the passing is very real. So I think he's one of the guys who's being slept on. The question will be, how well does he fare against ACC physicality and competition? Because Stanford admittedly hasn't played a very good schedule at this juncture, but in every game he's answered every challenge. And he's been double teamed. He passes over the top. He spins past doubles. He's very adept with his left hand. He's right-handed, but he finishes most of his shots near the hoop with his left hand. Once the scouting reports get better, I have some concerns, but I just think that the combination of fluidity, shooting touch, athleticism, and length are hard to deny for a guy that, and look at what Jay Huff is doing. Like, it's a simple comparison because they're both long and it's players that are not necessarily your typical prospect in terms of athletic burst, but I think he could easily do that.
He is so skilled. I mean, when you look at the positional size, the production, 22 and 11. He's shooting 40% from three. I agree with you on everything you said except one thing. He just doesn't protect the rim. He's averaging a career high 1 block per game. But you look at him, 7 foot, he rebounds, and he has the size, he has athleticism. I just have concerns about the defense. I guess I say this. I think he should be a better rim protector because he has the tools. They coming into the season, I think he had just as many steals as he had blocks. However, I will say this much about him, and I give him credit for it. He has gotten better every single year. 4 points a game as a freshman, doubled it as a sophomore, and then 15 points per game last year, and now 22 and 11, along with 2 steals. He is, I guess, statistically the most productive big in the country. But I still feel like he has room to grow as a defender, and he's just not consistently nasty enough. I think sometimes he kind of shies away from the physicality. So I like the Jay Huff. I don't know if it was necessarily a comparison you made, but Jay Huff was a guy when you watched him in college, you saw the talent. And then even if you watched him in the G League, you're like, this guy's good. And maybe I think with Jay Huff, he just doesn't have like the look in a sense. Like the optics don't like scream NBA player or athlete, but Jay Huff is he's proven this year that he is worthy of a rotational player. But yeah, I just wish Raynaud blocked more shots, and he's gotten better at it this year.
Let me push back a little bit. I agree he's not an amazing rim protector, but I think he's a good defender in the sense that Stanford asks him to hedge and he gets a lot of steals. He gets his hands on the ball. And defensively, he's so vital for them offensively. I think a lot of his rim protection issue is he doesn't want to foul. So I don't think he's an innately gifted rim protector, someone like Walker Kessler, who averaged over 4 a game at Auburn, and where he would, anytime near the rim, he would change your shot or block it. I'm not saying he's a good rim protector, even in collegiate basketball, compared to these guys. But I do think he's a good defender because his coordination and fluidity allows him to get in passing lanes. It allows him to hedge, play drop coverage. He can play different styles and still impact the game, and he cleans the glass beautifully. He gets every rebound in his vicinity. And I think you're absolutely right, though. He doesn't have the nasty. You look at him, and he'll play against Malik Brown and Duke. And I think if he were to match it with Maluach, I think he would win the matchup handily. Malik Brown's going to push him around. He's going to show the nasty. And you'd say Raynaud's knock is that he's soft. And I love Maxime Raynaud. I think he should be a second-team All-American. You can make an argument for first-team All-American at this juncture, but he's going to play teams with like Ian Shefflin of Clemson, and he's going to get bumped around. He's still going to put up numbers, but you're going to see his kind of temperament and his gentle nature. He's a friendly giant kind of come to fruition, and I think that'll cause people to be a little bit cautious about drafting him.
Yeah, my concerns, I'm looking at my notes now, doesn't always go up strong in traffic, and I would like to see him become more physical and nastier. And I'm looking forward to some of those matchups in the ACC. And I wonder, like, all right, when he goes up against a Malik Brown, is that a game where he takes 8 threes? That's one of the things I'm going to be looking for when he goes up against someone that's physical and they're trying to beat him up, because he is going to get beat up since he is basically the center point and center focus of the offense. Are we going to see him dominating the paint, or I think he's very gifted scorer, or is he going to float around the perimeter? All right, let's wrap it up with Johni Broome.
I think it's Johni.
I've heard 3 different, like I've seen people say Johni, I've heard Johnny. I still think he's related to the Boozers. Like, he looks exactly like Carlos Boozer to me, but he is having a phenomenal year. I think you can make a case for him as player of the year right now. And he's 22 years old. It seems like he's older. It seems like he's 24, but he's averaging 19.6 points, 12 rebounds, 3.6 assists per game, shooting 56% from the floor. And it's between him and Raynaud as, in my opinion, just the 2 most productive bigs statistically in the country. What are your thoughts on him as the NBA prospect? I've seen some people say he's a first rounder.
I'm not quite there on the first round buzz, but I will say he's a better athlete than I thought he was in watching this year. I think he's improved that. The main noticeable difference in terms of his offensive games, he stepped out and he's knocked down some threes. I don't think he's a great shooter, but he's shown the willingness to make some, or to take them and make some. But athletically, in the way that he's rebounded this year, he looks a little quicker to get off the ground. He looks quicker running the floor, and running the floor with that volume of shooting, the role that he has now in Auburn. I think he's been able to get in better shape. But because before, when I first watched him, you can call me a nerd and I'll accept it, but I watched Murray State when they were having one of their best years, and they ended up playing San Francisco in the 7-10 game. And I watched their championship game of their MVC tournament, and Johni Broome, a couple games prior, had 37 and 26, something like that, like an absolutely astounding numbers. And they weren't in the same game, but he had 20-something rebounds in one of them and 37 points in the semifinal of that league. And I thought to myself, okay, that's a high major player. Issue with him is he's slow-footed. I'm not so sure I'm right about that. I thought he was slow-footed even against mid-majors, and now I watched him play against Memphis, who has very quick guards, and he was able to switch on the perimeter, and he's able to not only protect the rim when he's already there, but he's also able to slide a little bit. He's got good hands. I don't think he's a great jumper, but he's able to locate the ball and go up strong. Auburn runs an offense that's very conducive to his game, where they run a flex offense. They play another big to set him bone-crushing screens, and he gets switched on the smaller players, and he just has to turn over his right shoulder, make the lefty jump hook or layup. But I'm impressed with his mobility. And so I don't know if the mobility alone and this slightly better shot moves the needle to be a first rounder as a 22-year-old. I think Raynaud's skill set, if you're to compare the two, is far superior, but he has the rugged toughness that Raynaud lacks. If you could give that to Raynaud, you're looking at a top 15 pick.
See, I think he's going to be a guy that falls to like the second round or maybe late first and goes to a team and he's productive right away. Like, he's protecting the rim. But the numbers that he's put up has been impressive. Like, the game that stood out to me was North Carolina, 23-19, 5 assists, 3 blocks. I think it was like the very next day, Memphis 21-16, 6 assists, 4 blocks, and then gave Duke 20 and 12. And he wasn't the most efficient that game.
Malik Brown killed in that game.
Yeah, but even then, like, I watched that game and I didn't realize how productive he was statistically until I saw the game. It didn't seem like he had 20 and 12, and he was in foul trouble. But I think that he is going to be drafted after somebody that's younger and less productive. And I think that as a rookie, I think that he's going to find a way in a rotation, maybe like a Trace Jackson Davis type. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. Once again, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Check out the Locked On newsletter at lockedondaily.com. And this has been a good episode with Leif, and we are out of here.